Welcome to Algebra 1, Lesson 6. Today's objective is hopefully by the end of the day, you'll be able to factor quadratics when the coefficient a is not equal to 1 using the grouping method. Activity 1. Activity 1 is first we're going to go over, or I'm going to give you a glimpse of the answers to your individual practice from last lesson where you factored 4-term polynomials using the grouping method. And then we're going to go over the notes for factoring quadratics when the coefficient a is not equal to 1. Now, the reason why we're doing that these lessons in this order is because factoring 4-term polynomials is actually a skill that you're going to need when you're factoring quadratics that have a term that's not 1. Okay? So after we do the notes, then I'm going to show you your individual practice and exactly what you need to do. Okay? So, looking at the answers to the homework or the individual practice. If you can see, I just want to remind you of the steps. So when you're factoring 4-term polynomials, you have to first group them in parentheses in groups of 2. So the first 2 terms and the third and fourth term go together. Then you look at each term and decide you can use your prime factorization, or you can just write down factors that you know of each of the set of parentheses. So for the first set of parentheses here, I had a squared plus 3a. And I decided, okay, what is the greatest common factor of these 2 terms? And the greatest common factor was a. They at least both had one a. They did not have any numbers in common. So I took out that a as a GCF. And I divided both of those terms by a and said, what did I have left? Well, a squared divided by a is a. And 3a divided by a is 3. I did the same thing with the second set of parentheses. 4a plus 12, find the greatest common factor. And the greatest common factor of 4a and 12 was 4. So I divided both of those by 4, put that GCF of 4 on the outside. When I divide it by 4, I say, well, what was left? 4a divided by 4 is 4, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. Remembering that the indication that you did it correctly is that whatever's in the parentheses is the same. As you can see here, we have a plus 3 and a plus 3. Okay, so that's considered one factor. So you write it down as a plus 3, that one factor. Then you take the 2 GCFs and you put them together, a plus 4. So now we see the answer here is that the factors of a squared plus 3a plus 4a plus 12 is a plus 4 times a plus 3. Okay. We're going to do something very similar in today's lesson. Okay. So here we have the steps to grouping when you have a quadratic that you cannot take a GCF out of. Okay, so you can't make a equal 1. Okay, so for example, if I have 3x squared plus 11x plus 10, I cannot factor out a GCF in this quadratic to make this 3 a 1. I can't factor out 3. Okay, so now I have to figure out what I need to do to find the factors, because this quadratic does have factors. So if you look at the checklist here, the first thing you do is you find the factors of a times c. In previous lessons, we would just find the factors of c that add to make b, but because we cannot make a equal 1, we now have to find the factors of a times c. So a here is 3, b is 11, and c equals 10. So the first thing I have to do is find my a times c. Well, 3 times 10 equals 30. So 30 is my A times C. Okay. And I'll have to find the factors of this that add to make 11. So you're still finding the factors of something that adds to make B. So here I have A times C, which is the first step. So A times C with 3 times 10 equals 30. Now I have to find the factors of 30 that add to make 11. Let's write out our factors of 30. The factors of 30 are 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. Okay. Now, which one of those add? Well, you could also say, I'm sorry, negative 1 and negative 30, negative 2 and negative 15, negative 3 and negative 10, and negative 5 and negative 6. Okay, we have to remember those negatives. Since 30 is a positive number, the factors can either be 2 positives or 2 negatives. Now, which one of those add to make 11? That would be 5 plus 6. Okay. So now we're going to rewrite. Okay. So you choose the pair that add to make B. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this 11 and we're going to rewrite it as that pair. So now 11x turns into 5x or 6x plus 5x. Okay. All right. So again, 5 plus 6 equals 11. So this 11x got broken down into 2 parts, 6 plus 5, or 6x plus 5x. Okay, now, as you can see, I almost wrote 5x here, but I chose to write 6x here because, as you can see, that was strategic because 3x squared and 6x are going to have, and this is plus 6x, 3x squared and 6x are going to have a common factor, and 5x and 10 are going to have common factors. Okay. Now, if you see here, this is a 4-term polynomial. Ta-da! I have 3x squared plus 6x and then plus 5x plus 10. That is a 4-term polynomial. Now I'm going to use the skills that I used last lesson, that we learned last lesson, to factor this. We're going to use the grouping method. So I'm going to group this 3x plus 6x, and I'm going to group the positive 5x plus 10. Okay, now looking at our first group, what's our common factor? Well, 3 is a factor of 6. Our greatest common factor then is going to be 3. And then they both have at least 1x. So our common factor is going to be 3x. Now, when I divide both of them by 3x, what do I have left? Well, 3x squared divided by 3x is x. And 6x divided by 3x is positive 2. I'm going to do the same with that second set of parentheses. Find the greatest common factor of 5x plus 10. Well, the greatest common factor of 5 and 10 is 5. And they do not have any x's in common. So that GCF is just 5. So when I divide both of these by 5, I get 5x divided by 5 is x, and 10 divided by 5 is positive 2. As you can see here, just like before, the inside of the parentheses is the same. X plus 2. So we're going to write that down. Okay. As one factor, X plus 2. And then we're going to take these two GCFs, this GCF of 5, and this GCF of 3x, and we're going to put those two together. Three x plus 5. Okay. And that will be our answer. This is our answer right here. The factors of 3x squared plus 11, x plus 10 is 3x plus 5, and x plus 2. Let's do this again. We have 3x squared minus 17 plus 10. We have to factor that. We cannot factor out a GCF. So we need to find the factors of A times C that add to make B. A here is 3. B is negative 17. Remember taking the sign. And C equals 10. So I need to find the factors of 3 times 10, which is 30, that add to make negative 17. Make sure you keep the sign. So the factors of 30 are 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. It can also be negative 1 and negative 30, negative 2, negative 15, negative 3, negative 10, and negative 5 and negative 6, just like before. Now, which one of these factors add to make negative 17? That would be negative 2 and negative 15. Okay, so negative 2 plus negative 15 equals negative 17. So then I'm going to break this negative 17 then into two parts. Negative 17 becomes negative 15x, or negative 17x becomes negative 15x and negative 2x. Now, how did I put the 15 first and the 2 second? Because if you see here, there's a 3x squared, and I know that negative 15x and 3x squared have a common factor, and I know negative 2x and 10 have a common factor. If you do write them in the wrong place, what will often happen is you won't get the correct greatest common factor, and then your numbers in your parentheses, or your factors in your parentheses, will not be the same. Okay, so then you have to go back and you have to switch which order you wrote them in. Okay, so now I have 3x squared minus 15x. I'm gonna group them by parentheses. Now I have to find the greatest common factor of 3x squared and 15x. Well, 3 is a common factor, the greatest common factor in numbers. So I'm going to write 3, and then they both have at least one x, so it's going to be 3x. When I divide them both by 3x, I get 3x squared divided by 3x is x, and then negative 15x divided by 3 is going to be negative 5. Doing the same thing for the second set of parentheses, negative 2x plus 10, the greatest common factor is going to be negative 2. And I took out the negative 2 because I noticed that, okay, so let's say I divide by negative 2 on both sides. Negative 2x divided by negative 2 is going to give me x left. And then positive 10 divided by negative 2 is going to give me minus 5. As you can see, the factors in the parentheses are the same. That's what I'm looking for. If I would have divided by a positive 2, this would have given me a negative x, and it's given me a positive 5, which would not have been the same as the other. So now I'm going to take this factor, x minus 5, okay, and I'm going to put this as 1. This is going to be 1. X minus 5. Okay, that is considered 1. And I'm going to take these two GCFs and I'm going to put them as a factor together. 3x minus 2. Okay. So as you can see, this is the answer. The factors of 3x squared minus 17x plus 10 is 3x minus 2 and x minus 5. All right, let's do it again. Example number 3. I have here 2x plus 7 minus 4. Let's identify our A, B, and C. A equals 2, B equals 7, and C equals negative 4. Since I cannot take out a GCF and make the A term 1, I need to find the factors of A times C, which would be 2 times negative 4, which is negative 8. That add to make B, which is 7. So I have to find the factors of negative 8 that add to make 7. Let's say the factors of negative 8. So since 8 is negative, I know that the factors must have different signs. So it can be negative 1 and 8. It can be negative 2 and 4. Okay. Or it can be 1 and negative 8 and 2 and negative 4. Now, which one of these add to make a positive 7? Well, that would be negative 1 plus 8 equals positive 7. All right, so now that we have identified that negative 1 times 8 equals negative 8 and negative 1 plus 8 equals positive 7, we're going to break this 7 down into the addition of those two terms. So positive 7 now becomes positive 8x minus 1x. And again, I decided to do 8x here because I know 2x squared and 8x will have a common factor. And I also know that negative 1x and negative 4 will have a common factor. So what's the greatest common factor of 2x squared and 8x? That would be 2x. 2 is a factor of 8. 2 is a factor of 2. It's the largest factor of both. And they both exactly have 1x in common. When I divide both of them by 2x, what do I have left? I have left x, and then 8x divided by 2x is positive 4. Now, negative 1x and negative 4. Their greatest common factor is going to be negative 1. I'm going to take out this negative 1, and when I take out the negative 1, I'm going to have x left, because negative 1x divided by negative 1 is x. And then negative 4 divided by negative 1 is going to be positive 4. As you can see here, the numbers in the parentheses here and here are the same. X plus 4, x plus 4. I'm going to write this x plus 4 as one term, one factor. And then I'm going to take my GCFs, negative 1 and 2x, and I'm going to write them as a factor. So here's my answer. The factors of 2x squared plus 7x minus 4 is 2x minus 1 times x plus 4. And you can always FOIL to figure out if you did it correctly. Okay? You can always FOIL. So for example, if I wanted to check to make sure I got this correct, let's do our FOIL for this one. That's going to be 2x squared plus 8x minus 1x minus 4. Combine your like terms, you get 2x squared plus 7x minus 4, which is exactly what we had in the beginning. Okay. All right, for this next one, I want you to pause the video and try to do this on your own. Try to do this on your own. And we'll come back and we'll do it together. All right, now, we cannot take out a GCF, so we must first find the factors of A times C. A here is 3, B is 7, C is 2. I have to find the factors of 3 times 2, which is 6. That add to make 7. Let's write down the factors of 6. 1 and 6, 2 and 3, negative 1 and negative 6, negative 2 and negative 3. Because remember, 6 is positive, so the factors can either be 2 positives or 2 negatives. Well, the 2 that add to make 7 are 1 and 6. So I'm going to split this 7 here up into 2 parts. It's going to be 6x and 1x. Okay. Now, I have to find the factors of my 2 groups now. I'm going to group them into 2's. So now the factors of 3x squared and 6, and this is positive 6, and this is positive 1. 3x squared and 6x are 3 and x, because they both share 3. Greatest common factor of the numbers is 3, and the greatest common factor of the variables is x. When I divide them both by 3x, I get 3x squared divided by 3x is x, and then 6x divided by 3x is positive 2. Now when I do it with the second one, my greatest common factor of the numbers is 1. Okay. And they do not share an x. So the greatest common factor is just 1. And 1x divided by 1, I'm sorry, put the 1 here. 1x divided by 1 is x, or 1x. And then 2 divided by 1 is positive 2. As you can see again, these should be the same. I'm going to take now my factor x plus 2 and write it as one factor. And I'm going to take my GCFs and write them as another factor, 3x plus 1. And this would be my answer. Okay. All right, so I wanted to make sure that you guys recognize that the only one step that's different here, okay, is that you have to find the factors of A times C that add to make B, not just C. And then once you do that, then you have to use the grouping method with the 4-term polynomial. For your individual practice, you're going to do numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Now, if you look at 5 and 6, as you notice, the steps aren't broken down as they were before. You're to use 2 through 4 to help you kind of get the hang of the process. And then you're going to try to do 5 and 6 without the broken down problem. Okay. I hope everyone is staying happy and healthy. If you have any questions or concerns with this individual practice work or any work that we've done so far, please do not hesitate to email me or comment on the video. Bye.